Sasaki and Peeps is like watching a little kid at a buffet whose eyes are bigger than his plate. He's already got a muffin and a sandwich and a roast chicken and half a pizza, and before heading to his seat, he turns off towards the taco bar and you think, well, this is not going to end well for anyone, but you still can't look away. Sasaki and Peeps, it's like making a bad decision at a buffet. We need to talk about this show because it's trying to be 4 different anime at once while not really pulling off any of them, yet it still somehow got a second season. I actually don't think it's a bad show. It did keep my interest through the whole thing, and I never really considered dropping it. It's just not one that I would go out of my way to recommend. Since it is getting that second season, I thought I'd put out a review so you can decide for yourself if it's something that you want to get caught up on before that new season drops. Let's check it out. When people were looking ahead to this past season and saw the title Sasaki and Peeps, a lot of people thought, oh, it's a Boy Kongming situation, where they try to land with the younger crowd using slang in a title, except this time the slang is from 2004. Now, Boy Kongming is a much better show that you should definitely check out, especially if you want a good music-themed anime that takes a playful look at ancient China. However, the Peeps in Sasaki and Peeps is about a bird that Sasaki calls Pii-chan, and the translators thought that Peeps was the best way to translate that. Side note to translators, it's 2024. You can use Chan, we'll get it. Sasaki himself is a pretty boring middle-aged salaryman who's still struggling financially to the point that he can't afford the one thing in his life that he wants, which is a pet. Finally, he decides that if he doesn't get a pet now, he's never going to do it. So he heads to the pet shop and buys a Java sparrow with a star on his chest. However, the sparrow starts talking to him and reveals that he's actually a powerful wizard called the Star Sage who's been trapped in the body of a bird due to a curse. One of my favorite things about this show is that Sasaki keeps Peeps in a bird cage even after learning all of this. Oh, not only are you a sentient human being, but you're a super powerful multi-dimensional wizard? Well, that's nice, but I really wanted a pet bird, so back in the cage with you. And Peeps is somehow cool with this. I find that fascinating. Not realistic, but fascinating. So Peeps starts using his magic to make Sasaki's life less boring, and they begin traveling between modern Japan and the fantasy world where Peeps is originally from, and nobody has to get hit by a truck, or die from overwork, or get stuck in a video game. It's kind of refreshing. The problems with this show start for me when Sasaki gets back to Japan. We find out that this is not just an isekai show where guys hopping between worlds to try to make a profit. It's also every other type of anime that's stuffed into one show. No joke, this show tries to combine isekai fantasy with underground psychic agencies, with Madoka-style dark magical girl shows, with apparently a demon versus angel show at the end, mixed in with a little bit of spice and wolf economics without the romance. The split in tone is pretty significant. One minute Sasaki is in a magical fantasy world, and the next minute he's dodging mind bullets in a corporate warehouse. There are 3 or 4 main plot lines that the anime is trying to juggle by the end, and the biggest problem with this is that we never spend enough sustained time in one setting to get to know those characters very well, so most of them kind of just drift through the series' runtime without making much of an impression. In this show, you'll be introduced to such unforgettable characters as Little Blonde Girl, Restaurant Guy, Psychotic Magical Girl, Merchant Guy, Psychic 16-year-old who looks like she's 36, 100-year-old Psychic Girl who looks like she's 16, and Clyde. His name is not really Clyde, this is just some rando without a name, but he should be called Clyde. There's definitely an attempt to try to give each character some distinguishing features, which I do appreciate, but the problem is I still don't have much of an attachment to any of them. Even if they killed off one of the characters, I'm not sure I would care all that much. Side note, saying none of the characters actually dies is not a spoiler. In fact, maybe lots of them die. Yeah, that's it. Maybe everyone dies. Everyone dies and no one is ever happy and you'll never ride a unicorn. The end. Well, that was needlessly depressing. It kind of feels like each part of the show is auditioning to be its own fully developed anime. As it is, characters are in a scene or a story arc just long enough to move their part of the plot along, and as soon as that part is done, we change settings and characters because it seems easier for the show to just add the existence of an entirely new world than it is to develop any of the characters, and that includes Sasaki and Peeps. It's kind of like that slash and burn farming technique where you move from field to field, because if you ever stayed in one place for too long, you'd quickly find out that you're left with nothing after that initial payoff, except instead of yams and wheat, Sasaki and Peeps does this with different anime genres. When it comes to the theme songs, I like but don't love the OP and the ED for different reasons. The music in the OP is fine but not great, which is kind of a running theme with the show, but the ED is one of the more interesting parts of the whole thing. The music again is just fine, but I love the art style. I've seen it described as cursed online, and that's fair, but in a show that played most of its decisions pretty safe, from characters to art to music, I thought it was an interesting choice to make the ED the one place where they piled all their creative energy. It's also kind of baffling that the scenes that are depicted there just don't match what goes on in the anime. You see this kind of 3D representation of the princess girl, Elsa, trying to perform different spells as Sasaki and Peeps watch nervously for any explosion or unintended side effect. At the end, the princess succeeds in making an apple pie and everyone's happy. The problem is, those characters never really hang out together in the anime, and there's almost zero indication that Elsa has any interest in magic. I found myself thinking, okay, that's a cool looking show, but it's not this show, which is how I felt about the OP for the Apothecary Diaries in my review. I get the feeling that Elsa was supposed to be a third main character, at least for the story arcs that take place in her world, but we learn more about her during that Uncanny Valley ED than we do during the entire rest of the anime. Still fun though. There are two things that lower the stakes in Sasaki and Peeps to the point where I would argue that this is more of a slice of life show than anything. The first thing is Peeps. He's overpowered. If you ask the question, what magical powers does Peeps have? The answer is apparently all of them, except for the ability to change back into a human. No matter what the situation, Peeps has a magic spell that can deliver Sasaki from any dilemma. It gets to the point later on where Sasaki has to literally leave Peeps at home to give the plot any kind of tension. Being surrounded by an army of lethal psychics can be downright boring if all of your problems can be solved by the magical god bird that you keep in your pocket. Speaking of boring, the other thing that lowers the stakes is Sasaki, but that's not an insult. Sasaki's boringness makes him seem a little more realistic. He's kind of a calming influence for the viewer as a connecting rod between these different settings and as a mature voice amongst characters who lack his composure. Does that make him a great character? Nope, but it does make him a useful one, and that's similar to how I feel about the show. Not exactly great, but useful to people who are looking for a smooth watch. Because the show stars a very calm protagonist who carries around a Deus Ex Machina in his pocket, you're never worried for him. And the anime becomes a slice of life show where instead of running a cafe or being part of an after-school club, Sasaki just tries on different anime genres every episode. So, is Sasaki and Peeps good? Eh, it's alright. It's definitely a disjointed show that has trouble developing all of its parts equally, which is understandable given that it's just 12 episodes. It's an ambitious show that makes me wonder if the source material is better at juggling all those pieces together, because it can devote more time to each one. It's not bad, and in a season that I found to be kind of slow outside of the big hitters, I'm glad we got it. I give Sasaki and Peeps 6 out of 10 interdimensional parakeets. Some of Sasaki's plotting is pretty fun to watch, and I was always curious to see just how much they would pile up on its plate. If you're running out of shows to watch, this is a perfectly fine option with enough twists to keep things moving. But if you're thinking, I have to binge watch the first season, so I'll be ready for season 2, well, whether you watch both of them or skip both of them, your life's probably going to be pretty much the same, so I wouldn't worry too much about this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.